Hi there and welcome to my basic combat guide for Wildermyth. I'm Icon and this video will guide you through all you need to know to win some combats when you're quite new to this game. I'm going to talk about basic combat strategies, I'm going to talk about the defining characteristics of the character classes, their baseline perks, their defining pros and cons, and where you can go with their builds. I'm going to also give you some ideas and impressions about how to survive your combats when you're still very new and you don't have any idea what's happening around you. And I won't be doing any particular builds. I won't be trying to give you the impression that there's some strongest way to play the game. Rather, I want you to understand the mechanics good enough to just pick what you like the most. So, to get started, we're going to talk about the character classes. There's 3 classes in the game: fighters, hunters, and mystics. The fighters come with the guardian skill, which is their defining baseline skill, which is quite easy to explain. They will, if you activate that, she will try to attack everything which passes her radius here. And that's that. Pretty useful, pretty versatile, and a good reason to only use half your turn from your warriors. On the next spot are the hunters. Hunters can be played as ranged fighters, but they can also use melee weapons, and they also gain melee traits, so there is the option to play your hunter as a melee character. But the standard setup is a bow, and their defining baseline skill is the Silk Step. Silk Step ends your turn and puts you into the Grey Plane, which might be actually also translated as stealth. So hunters can use this skill to just go hidden, and this does 2 things. First off, the enemies don't see you anymore. Well, that's pretty obvious. But the other thing is, when you're attacking out of the Grey Plane, you will ignore the enemy's armor rating. Pretty nifty when you want to get past the enemy armor. Enemy armor is depicted as blue shields for physical armor and purple shields for magical armor. As we see here, our enemies are not featuring any armor whatsoever. The last character class is the Mystic, which is basically the mage class, and it's possibly the most versatile, interesting, and complex class in the game. Mystics do their spellcasting by interfusing with environment items. So you see here, when I can interfuse with everything, which has a white circle around here, and every interfusion gives you a certain spell to cast out of that environmental element, which has different effects. For example, we have the Discus, which is a projectile which ricochets off to another enemy. We have Splinter Blast, which is just an arcing explosion which does a decent amount of armor shred. There's so many things that you can do with the environment. This makes the Mystic very, very versatile, but also always bound to the options he has in combat. These 3 elements together form your parties. You can have up to 5 people in one combat, where it's up to you how you shuffle your character classes then. So you can do 2 warriors, 2 hunters, 1 mystic, or whatever mixture seems to be good for you. There's really no ideal way to play that. I think it's up to your taste and to your perks. Another thing which is quite basic but worth mentioning: when your characters stand close to each other, they start to wall, which gives you 1 point of temporary armor for that. Keep in mind the relationships of your characters in between each other influence their baseline traits as well. So when people are friends or lovers, they are developing new things among each other. Check it out in the relationships tab. It's really useful to utilize that. Okay, character classes have been dealt with. The basic skills here are always the same. Mystics can interfuse, warriors can intercept, and archers can go into stealth. When we look at our enemies, I can only recommend you to mouse over them and check out these texts. It's really, really useful to know what they're up to. As we see here, this Woken Slinger is a ranged attacker. Well, the name gave it away a little bit, but it's really useful to know what's up your alley. And for example, the Will of the Prophet skill, they always knock back enemies, is something that you might want to know. So my first turns usually are pretty easy. I try to keep the squad together, and it's really cool to wall together and hide behind the warrior, shielding yourself off. When you want to fight with your ranger, always, I keep calling them rangers, hunters, always try to avoid shooting over cover. As you see here, it's 73% here and 66% here, and if they stand behind obstacles, there is a decent chance that your attack just goes into the obstacle instead of hitting the enemy. We're here going to use our first interfusion. Interfusions are quite interesting in that aspect, that you have to take into account that the spell will always be activated from the interfused object. If you here check out the Splinter Blast, we do that. Interfusions are, by the way, always a free action per turn, so you can move, interfuse, and spellcast with ease. Splinter Blast, as you see here, has this cross-shaped explosion range, and we see it's based around the tree. So this gives mystics insane ranges to reach their enemies. Try to get yourself your own method of evaluating which kind of spells you like, and then you will find a way to deal with that. Also keep in mind that your mystic is always relying on what's in his environment. Therefore, you won't be using always the same strategy with the mystic. Improvisation is really important for that one. With my turns, I really like to go in a manner that whenever I can, I like to try first to shave off the enemy's armor if possible. Warriors often have the traits to destroy enemy armor, or axes, for example. The pickaxe here is the tier 0 axe. Axes have that as a innate ability. They shred armor. So first you try to shred the armor of your enemy if possible, and then you will try to finish them off from there on. In general, I like to postpone the actions of my characters as I see it fit. It's really hard to give you a clear rule of thumb there, but it's always a wise choice to keep your people walled together and try to avoid rushing into combat blindly. Whenever you can, try to get your hunter into Grey Plane if possible. For example, if there's nothing to fight in a turn, I like to do half a turn for him and then do the Silk Step wherever I want to go. Because this way, your ranger does not only go past the enemy's armor with his next attack, but also you can use the hunter's stealth to just safely scout out enemy positions. Here I want to talk about spirits for a second, because I really found it quite cool to see one in my tutorial video. Spirits are friendly creatures that are just hanging around here, and when you get close to them, you can enchant your gear with the respective element. The cool thing about that, every time you unlock one enchanted weapon, you unlock that for good. So now I can always craft fire enhanced staves. So these spirits, try to grab them whenever you can. So we see here, Style and Poor, I have fallen in love, which is something really good. I'll explain that in a sec. So when we gain loot, always try to replace lower tiered loot with higher tiered loot, of course. That's a pretty basic thing. We're going to go through another fight in a sec, because that was just a mere beginning and not really representative. I want to talk about the stats of the game in general here for a moment to give you a impression what's happening here. So armor and warding, I already brought that up. They are your baseline stats to avoid physical and magic damage. Dodging and blocking are separate rolls which are rolled to avoid damage altogether. It's quite important that enemy accuracy is negating your dodge and block ratings again, and that's why your own accuracy is also important to negate the enemy's dodge and block ratings. Stunt chance translates into critical chance, so in this game criticals are called stunts, And there's also bonus damage from items, spell damage if it applies, and there's potency. Potency is, for one, enhancing all the Mystic's skills, but also enhancing other activated skills. When something is being enhanced by potency, it's always in the description text. So for my characters here, let's see, is there anything else? No, no more traits. That's all the stats we needed to talk about. Relationships, as we see them here. Friends gain extra block when walling together, which is really cool to know. And lovers get extra damage when the loved one is being attacked, which is also pretty cool. You can utilize these relationships between your characters, where you can say your tank and your damage dealer are in love together. Pretty decent thing. When the tank gets attacked, the damage dealer's damage increases. Pretty good stuff. Okay, so let's go into another fight before we're going to talk about the perk and trait system one more time. So I'm going to meet you there. So, whenever a new combat starts, I really can't stress it out how important I personally think it is to avoid rushing forward and always try to deal with the enemies that are in front of you. Like, for example, in this situation, I could use Astalborn to run over here and take a look there, but this would also aggravate more enemies. The best way to deal with larger numbers than your own is to take them down bit by bit. So therefore, I am a big fan of trying to whittling down whatever is in front of you. Here we see these enemies have armor, and we see also when we check them out, that was not what I wanted, but okay, that was an accident. When we mouse over them, here we see Bone Link. They gain armor and blocking from nearby allies. This one is a melee and this one is a shooter. So, for example, here it is quite important to mouse over these enemies because you see here, this is a magic damage dealer and you can extract a lot of useful information out of that. So, since we had a whoopsie with Astalborn, we're going to Guardian here, and I'm going to put Style over here, Interfuse, and here I see I have either Scalding Rain or Discus available. Scalding Rain is a magic attack which shreds armor, which is exactly what I want to have. Sadly, it's only a one target spell, and here goes the next thing. I can either get the Spectic down or the Sommelier wounded. And if that's ever the question, kill. Because a enemy which has only 1 HP left hits as hard as an enemy with all his HP left. So whenever you have the ability to finish an enemy off, just do it. It's always better than just scratching somebody. With some very, very rare and special exceptions for very quirky and special skill sets. So next turn we have the situation here. I really like to just get the warrior up front if that's the case. Here we have 2 ranged enemies, so it's a good choice to just rush in there and try to deal as much damage as possible. I wanted to go first with the axe because I knew that the axe shreds the armor away. Now I'm moving my hunter to the flank, and there we go. For the last action, we're just going to put Style next to Pora, because, like I mentioned before, walling together is a good thing. This increases Pora's defenses, and now we use the Scalding Rain one more time. Keep in mind that the Mystic's skills are damaging and ultimately destroying the environmental items. So therefore, sometimes you can also accidentally destroy your cover with that. I personally like to go this way. I use the Mystic skill when possible to shred away armor. If that's not possible, I try to shred away the armor with the warriors or whatever seems to be better, and then the damage dealers try to do their thing. As we have it here, the next situation, just like I explained it before, putting them together like that. Keep one thing though in mind, stealthed allies can't wall together because, you know, they're stealthed. So, here we go. This fight, I never separated my people too far from each other, and I always try to take the fight step by step. There's absolutely no shame in doing basically nothing in one turn, except for putting your people, your team together to move them as a squad. In this game, it's extremely powerful to keep moving as a squad, because this way you can really lower the damage that your team suffers. Because, you know, every wound you suffer in this game has to be cured after the fight on the Overland map. Okay, so that sums up pretty much the basics of combat. I'm going to round up this video now with a few thoughts I have about perks and such, so we're going to meet there in a sec. Alright, so I cooked up a random fight where we get a couple of rolls on the perks, and let's get started, just to give you a few impressions what I think about perks. So the warriors have a couple of enhancers which go for their sentinel or their guardian skill. Paladin is one that I really like because it allows your fighters to just end their turn and go into defense stance. This is one trade. When it comes, I really like to take that. Engage is pretty cool because it forces your enemy to, it's basically a taunt, and as you see here, its range is being increased by potency. Backslam is a knockback attack, which gets stronger for the amount of armor. Really good fusion if you want to put your, when you want to make your fighter a tank. One word at this point, these perks here are your chance to specialize and focus the build of your characters. So more often than not, I end up with the actual specialization that my character goes into when, depending on the skills I get drafted here. So the Mystics, they gain different enhancers for their interfusions or upgrades for their interfusion abilities in general. So here we see extra interfusions. The normal ratio is 2 interfusions at max. Then the Mystic needs to dissolve them or destroy the respective item. The extra interfusions, the advanced interfusions, they are, well, you really need to know them to say this is good or that is good. My personal recommendation here would be, if you don't know them yet, just try them out, give them a test drive and check out what you like about that, because sadly, as you see here, there's not too much of an explanation beforehand. For the Elementalist, for example, I know the Infernal Rain is just comparable to the move I did in the fight before, and Splinter Salvo is an upgrade which allows you to do a detonation between 2 wooden items. It's very creative what the Mystic can do, and my recommendation is just try it out. A few things are explained quite well. Here, Earth Scribe gives you the ability to wall with interfused objects. Just try it out. The Hunters, they get different upgrades for utility things like placing down traps or throwing blinding cones, and also, like I mentioned, here's a specialization for melee. You get a action refund after a melee kill. Generally said, if you want to go for utility things, keep an eye out for potency gear for your Hunters, because they really benefit a lot from that. So here goes another fighter. We have here Wolf Call, which goes into the supportive skills. We have here the same things as before. Yeah, Ambush. Ambush is one perk that I wanted to talk about because I personally love it. So Ambush is very comparable to the Guardian skill from the Warrior. You aim at a spot, and then if an enemy passes that spot, you shoot them, and even better, if there's no enemy coming, you get to get a free attack in the next turn, given that the Hunter doesn't need to move in that turn. But if the Hunter doesn't need to move that turn, he can even shoot twice. This is by far one of my favorite traits because it gives you wonderful abilities to control the environment. Quelling Moss is towards poison, and poison, as we see here again, is interacting with potency. Poison is just flat out damage over time. Pretty good stuff to whittle down big enemies. So we're going to go through another draft. Give me a sec. Alright, one more roll of perks here, because we didn't see enough of them. So Hunters get also the ability to hobble enemies, which reduces their speed, something which I really appreciate to slow down the advance of melee enemies. Goes really strong with extra mystics on your team. And Ember Arrows is really cool because it makes them immune to fire. And as you see here, the hunters interact a lot with potency, but only if they have the respective traits. So if you roll up a few cool potency traits, feel free to skill your hunter into that, but if not, rather don't. Here we go. Vigilance is a ability to get more reaction strikes. Broad Swipes is a AoE cleave, basically. As you see here with the fighters, you get to decide quite decisively if they are going to be defensive or offensive tools. For the mystics, you see here also, they have a path which gives them the ability to go into a more warrior-like stance. For each interfused object, her physical attacks gain damage, and Spirit Blade, my allies gain damage when they are adjacent to interfused objects. So your mystic doesn't need to be a ranged character. Every character class has a lot of different ways to skill them. This is really cool about this game. Zealous Leap is also worth mentioning. We have every second turn a move which gives us the ability to jump some. There's a lot of things going on. Okay, I think that was covering up those skills that I really wanted to cover up. And last but not least, I want to thank you so much for watching this video. This was, of course, only covering up the basics, but if you summarize, if I might summarize one more time, keep your characters together, move as a squad, try to avoid aggravating more enemies when you already have enemies in sight. Try to always kill off whatever you have already in front of you. Study your enemies, check out what they do instead of rushing blindly into that, and try to specialize your characters according to the traits they get offered and according to the items they get offered. Don't go too fixated to with the idea like, this guy has to be my tank. It won't work like that, because the randomness of this game is really giving you not really the option to always build what you want to. Alrighty, so that's that. I hope that was kind of helpful for you. Drop your comments down below. If there are any questions left about these, ask away. I know that it was impossible to feature all the things that were worth mentioning in this game. Feel free to leave me a thumbs up if you liked that video. I would be really appreciating if you also check out my channel. I do daily content like that. Just subscribe, turn on those notifications, and you won't miss anything in the future. Also in the descriptions down there, you will find the link to my Twitch channel where I do daily streams. And if you feel like supporting my project, there's also links there which allow you to give me tips, coffee, or whatever you might please. One more time, let me thank you for your watching time, and see you soon. Bye-bye.